Hello, hello. I'm Hannah Taylor, and I'm here with Houston Poem to do a little video about, I guess we're calling it energetic orientation in relationship. Do you want to say anything about this, Houston?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me on. You sent this to me, and I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, this is really cool. So when you invited me to talk with you about it, I got all giddy. I was telling my friends, I was like, she invited me to talk with her about it. So, yeah, we're gonna see where this goes. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, let's check it out. Okay. So this actually came out of I was doing a lot of polarity teaching and a lot of the masculine feminine dynamic in romantic partnership. And my work since then, basically, it's like I hacked it. I figured out how to have peaceful romantic partnership. And that is why I started teaching about the village principles, because when you have harmonic partnership, you have something that is generating energy and taking up very little energy.
Hmm.
Like harmonic devotional partnership with like healthy polarity and all the healthy dynamics is just effortless and generating energy. So it's not going to take up any of the energy that it generates. So we really need to be like elbow to elbow serving our community. So as part of the whole like partnership polarity conversation, I started to think into uh, penetration and openness dynamics because I was hearing so much about women being open, women being feminine, receptive, all this stuff. And what I started to understand is that openness has its own polarity, right? It's not like penetration and openness are on a polarity. It's like openness has its own polarity of emptiness and receptivity.
Hmm. Yeah, I hear that. Like, within openness, there is a passive openness and an active openness, right? So emptiness is like a passive openness that just allows, whereas receptivity is an active openness that welcomes and maybe even like invites forth.
hmm hmm Yeah, precisely that, precisely that. And my best like physical example of this is the cups in the cabinet. Like the cups in the cabinet are clean, they're ready for liquids to be poured into them. But while they're in the cabinet, they're in an empty state.
Hmm.
Open, ready, empty. While they're in the cabinet, we don't pour things into them. But like, why not? Why shouldn't you just like pour something in to the cabinet? Like, there's just
Yeah,
something I'm uncomfortable with it, right? Like,
it's a little messy.
could be, but but it's kind of like microwaving a mug of water. I'm just like, why is this so wrong? Like, why does this feel so wrong? Like it shouldn't, I don't know why it feels so wrong, but like even if we just contemplate like having a perfect pour of the orange juice into the cup in the cabinet, like, I don't know. I don't like it. I don't like it. Um, so this is kind of one of the things about right relationship is that it's not actually about like moral rightness or objective rightness. It's like what feels correct to my body and really listening and not needing a reason why it feels so wrong to do something that I because at the end of the day, it's all this is a joke from as we were planning this. You were talking about micromanaging the eternal balance. It's just so good. Um, but I find that's what we're doing when we're saying something's right and something's wrong. So, okay, so the empty cups are in the cabinet, and then we move them to the counter and they become receptive. Another piece, well, let's actually, I'm going to share the graphic that we're working from, and then we can start talking about it more.
Something that's coming through as you're saying that, just this notion of like contextual relating, like relationships are contextual.
Mm,
You know, like you could have perfect masculine, feminine, perfect masculine, feminine balance and harmony. That in one context, like the bedroom feels right and appropriate, and then in another context, like at the dinner table with your parents, you know, doesn't feel appropriate,
Mm.
right? Yeah, so just recognizing that aspect of it too. I love that you're bringing in uh, the context in that regard.
Yeah, it's really everything. I mean, that is one of the things. So, one of the reasons that I wanted you on here is like I very much trust your understanding of fractals, that like all the truth is going to play out on this level, and then on this level, and then on this level, and then on this level. So, that I think is what's going to make for such a nuanced conversation here, because there is this context aspect of like what is the worldly context and then our context within that for how we relate with a partner. And then there's also like what context am I being for my partner, right? And what context are they offering me to relate with, right? And
Mm.
that's really, I mean, we might just call this relational contexts even.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, right. Kind of like the fundamental possible contexts that are at play.
Yeah, yeah, and like the context I'm offering someone who's interacting with me. Yay. Okay, cool. I knew we'd find our way to something valuable. Okay, cool. So here we have a list of 4 contexts, and we're sharing the screen, and we can see that the 4 contexts that we might offer the other person in terms of what our energy is being in a given moment are empty, receptive, those are the open ones, penetrative, and closed. Do you want to speak to penetration a little? You.
Um, sure. Yeah, so I'm seeing this like, and, I always come from the Tao. So this could be like yin and yang,
Hmm.
where yin would be like the open, right? And then the yang within the yin is receptive.
Mm,
Or so like empty would be the yin, and then the yang within the yin would be receptivity. And then if yang was like, uh, yeah, maybe that doesn't quite map on exactly, but you have the you have the yang and the yin within the yang as well. So
mhm,
that other polarity. So like there's penetration and then closeness.
mm, mm,
Yeah, so I'm taking this sense of penetration as like initiating,
mm,
uh, going forth,
mhm,
right? Whereas closeness would be more like I almost have this image of like you have like a system, like a bubble, like if you're viewing it from the side and there's like energy coming out of it. And if it were to like come out and then just like snap off, like the system would close there.
mm, mm, mhm. Yeah, so there's this sense of like, well, I like to say that sovereignty is a lie. It's a valuable, valuable delusion, right? Which, which is that, and the truth is that we are distinct, but we're always in some sort of exchange with the world. We can't not be in exchange with the world. Actually can't be separate. So it feels like to me in closeness, we're like walling off.
Mm,
And what we're really ending is, or what we're introducing is like resistance to part or all
mm,
of reality
mm,
is like the presence of closeness. Like it doesn't actually close us off. I think, in fact, it wouldn't feel so disconnecting, alienating, and lonely if closing really closed us.
mm, mm. Yeah, the way that I translate that is I like to think and talk about membranes.
Mm, mm,
Like the earliest common ancestor, like the first single celled organism formed because the first membrane formed, right? And thus
mm,
there was separation, was born with that, right? And so then self was born with that, right? And like the membrane is incredibly intelligent because it has the ability to open and close.
mhm,
But the self that's held within the membrane, um, maybe that doesn't close and open,
mm,
right? So like if receptivity is the membrane opening to
mm,
allow information in,
Mm.
then penetration is the membrane opening to allow information out.
Oh, wow.
Something like that.
Delicious. Yeah. I mean, just talking about the membrane, really talking about because boundaries, right? A membrane is a boundary. It's a point of connection. We don't have connection without distinction, right? It's like, I love how you just said that, right? Like the first membrane is actually the first connection.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Well, and what you're also calling to kind of this is kind of maybe a sidebar, I'm not sure, but like there's this type of creation which is like the division creation where we begin whole and the embryo splits, right?
Mm,
It splits and splits and splits inside of itself, forming distinctions within the whole.
mm,
And that's like a creation and a growth process. And there are some organisms that just do that and reproduce that way. And then there's polar creation, which we as humans are equipped for, and is like another fact of creative matter in the world, which is why I like the masculine feminine. Like I like to say that nothing is inherently masculine or feminine. It's in masculine or feminine relationship within a
mm,
fractal. So it's like I could be in the feminine as related to you, and then as related to another friend, I'm in the masculine role, right?
mm,
Like I am not feminine
mm,
in any given like snapshot of any given fractal. I might be in one of those postures.
right.
Um, but the polar creation is two things create. So there's like creating by splitting, which is one thing becomes two and three and never stops there. And then there's the polar creation, which is two things interact to create something which is different from either of them.
Yeah. That brings, I hear Terence McKenna's novelty theory.
Tell me more.
That's his whole thing. Yeah, the notion that since the beginning of time, a wave of novelty has rolled across creation,
Mm.
where two existing structures have come together to create something that has never before been seen. And
Oh,
that novelty complexifies over time, and that we find ourselves at the nexus of compressing novelty.
mm, mm, yum.
Um,
Yeah, I love it. I love it because, and this is the thing that has kind of driven me crazy in the last 5 to 10 years or whatever. I keep hearing like the binary, blah, blah, blah. Like, oh, like two options. I'm like, the thing about a binary is it absolutely fails to create two options. Like the binary is the creator of infinite nuance, right?
mm,
Like I
mhm,
have a computer problem. Is my solution a one or a zero? Right? Like what?
right.
Like
Yeah.
that's not how that works.
Yeah, and I love that because it anytime we do something like this, which is an act of brilliant creation where you're taking something so complex and breaking it up into four little categories, right? We're always going to run into but it's not nuanced enough.
Mm,
But it still serves its purpose
mm,
in helping us identify larger senses of relationship structures and
mm,
relationship dynamics that are at play.
mm. Oh, thank you for calling to that. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing where this chart, the distinctions on this chart are a lot like saying my hand, right? Like my hand. And we all know what a hand is. Like we all know what a house is, right? But like my hand, where does my hand actually stop? Like just because I would call this a wrist, right? And then I would call
Right.
this an arm, right?
Right.
But like, is this my hand or is it my fingers? So where's my hand? Because I would usually include the fingers in the hand, right?
Right.
So that's what we're looking at here, especially in the open polarity, in the polarity of emptiness and receptivity. It is so nuanced, it's so gradual. It's like brackish water, right? Where the salt water and the fresh water meet. It's like, okay, we have some things that are for sure fresh water. We have some things that are for sure salt water. And then we have this kind of mixed area where it's like, I'm not really, because there's this sense where sometimes eye contact can feel like penetration, right? And then other times penetration is like literally the entering of someone's body,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then like emptiness could cuddle. Like emptiness could be in a cuddled up state. Two open, empty people could be like very close to one another, and someone might argue exchange or receptivity is happening there, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so it's really nuanced, and we're looking in this is really, like you said, it's just a frame that we're going to look at. We're going to try to look at. And then it's up to anyone who consumes this information to make these delineations within themselves in an ongoing moment to moment way.
Hmm. And in a way that serves their intention strategically, you know?
Mm, mm. Yeah. All right. Well, I want to read this chart. So I want to talk about, so we've got empty, receptive, penetrative, and closed. Those are our working energetic dispositions and orientations that we're looking at here. So when we have an empty person and an empty world, right? So we're like self and world. Like this is what I'm bringing as context, and then what is the world offering me as context? So it could be another person, but one of, as I was thinking of like empty, empty, it's like I go to nature and I'm empty, and nature is this like empty, this like self contained system, this thing that's already in eternal balance, right? And doesn't need my interference. And then I have this presence because I am empty and nature's empty and we're just present together.
Mm,
Um, and then empty and receptive together creates a listening.
mm,
Um,
mm,
the listening direction goes that the receptive one is listening to the empty one.
mm, mhm, mm. I love that. I love that sort of inspires and uh yeah, calls forth this understanding that emptiness doesn't mean not having anything in it. It just means that everything that goes into it is allowed to pass through,
Ooh.
right? So it's like that through the emptiness, then the receptive vessel then holds and like takes that in. And that's
Mm.
listening, right? It's almost like there can't be listening if there isn't an emptiness, a void through which the information can travel, you know?
Yeah. Yum.
Yeah.
Yum. Beautiful. Yeah. And so then when we have receptive and receptive, we have collaboration. So it's like I would say on this call, I'm really open to your ideas. I really want them. You're really open to my ideas. So here we are collaborating on something that we can create. So collaboration is a creative state, which is like kind of that creation alongside one another. I would call this like making the most out of being two people. Whereas the penetrative receptive is kind of like two become one and birth the third, and like there's this more yeah, penetrative, interpenetrated type of creation, but there's also this like distinct type of creation where you're receptive, I'm receptive. The the thing that I like to call out on this chart is that that collaborative energy is meant to be like 85-95% of our relationships.
Mm, mm, yeah. Yeah, it certainly matches my like world vision, you know? I think of collaboration as like if anything is going to give rise and give birth to a kind of world that has less violence,
Mm,
right? It's collaboration. And I love how like you're saying it necessitates a willingness to be separate
mm.
and yet still work together.
Oof.
Yeah.
It makes me think of The Prophet by Khalil Gibran on marriage, because he talks about like as the cypress and the oak stand separately, but their leaves intertwine and their roots intertwine. Like he's like, that's how we be married. Like, you eat together, but not of the same loaf. You drink together, but not of the same cup, and it's like that
Yeah.
distinction. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Love that.
Yum. Beautiful.
Hmm.
Yeah, so the thing so then we've got penetrative energy. So when we match penetrative energy with emptiness, we have easy violation.
Mm,
So easy to violate, right? And this is like, you know, the way that like a soft body takes a bullet, right? Like so easily
mm,
violated,
mm,
so easily, you know. Um, and yeah, and then when we have penetrative energy matched with penetrative energy, we're at war. We have resistance in war, like I'm trying to get in you, you're trying to get in me. That's a fight.
mm,
And
mhm,
then we have this penetrative receptive, which is like the gold standard of creation. We're like obsessed with this state, especially in romance. We're like, this is the state, right? But it's like, uh, well, I don't want to give away too much because we've got more slides here to look at,
mm,
but basically this is the state where violation is impossible.
mm,
If I'm receptive, violation is not possible.
mm.
And if we look at it, it's actually the only non-violent state of penetration
Mm.
is when penetration is met with receptivity in the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then when penetrative energy meets closed energy, we have violent violation. Like
Mm,
it takes a lot of work to get through the armor to hurt
mm,
that person.
mm.
Did you want to speak to any of these pieces?
I feel like there's more in the coming slides
Yeah.
that will eliminate these. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'll just keep going with the so we've got empty and closed. This is where like the closed person is going to feel disconnected and the empty person might just feel they might feel the disconnection from the other person. But like this is the part where like closedness is still in an interaction. Like closeness is cutting off the closed one's experience of a lot of what's going on in reality, but it doesn't stop impacting reality.
Mm.
So it's like we can all think of this as like when your partner or your roommate is home and they're angry, that is not an empty house. Like an empty house feels very different than a house where someone's actively ignoring you or angry or closed off. And so
Mm,
I want to honor that like closeness is this number one protective of me, but it's also trying to protect you. Like if I'm angry and I close up, that's because I don't want my anger to hurt you. And I don't know how to steward it otherwise than to just like close up. So there is this benevolence often in the
mm,
closed state,
mm,
this really good intention
mhm.
in the closed state. And so then it's like the closed person is just kind of often in this panic where they're like, okay, well, I know that you're still impacted by my presence and the way that I'm closed, but it would be so much worse if I were penetrating right now with my anger.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It kind of brings up the question of like how to relate with closed states.
Mm,
When someone is presenting closeness, how do we relate with that? It's definitely probably requires more skill to navigate that than it does to navigate the more open states.
mm. Yeah, and different skills. And I would say
Different
that
skills.
actually, like most of us are much more prepared to interact with closeness
Mm,
than we are actually with open emptiness. I think I want to get into that a little more later because when we talk about how we've alienated the state of open emptiness, I think we're gonna like really blow this part up. So then we've got a closed person and a receptive person. There's alienation happening there. Like the receptive person is like, I want to know about you. And the closed person is like, get away from me. And so then there's kind of alienation on both sides because it's, yeah, this how to relate with closeness is like such a big deal. Um, it reminds me there was like this Disney Channel parable. You know how they did those like on the commercial breaks on Disney Channel? They would have those little parables. And one of them was about the sun and the wind had an argument about who could get the little girl to take her jacket off.
Hmm.
So the wind blows and blows and blows and blows and tries to blow her jacket off. And she just tucks it on tight, right? And like buttons it all up. And then the wind can't blow the jacket off, right? And then the sun is like, let me try and get that jacket off and just warms everything up. And then the girl's too hot. She takes the jacket off, right? So that feels really related to how to relate with a closed state. It's like one of like kind of the instinct that we've all been trained to apply here is like go to war with the wall.
Mm.
Describe the wall, that's a closed state, all this stuff. And like what that does is it just reinforces the need to be closed for the other person in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So then we went over penetrative and closed is violent violation, and then closed and closed is loneliness. And there is just a loneliness epidemic right now because it's like a whole lot of closed people all around right now. Whew.
Oof, yeah.
Okay. All right. So, yeah. So, this is where most adults in America are orbiting, in my experience, especially if they have a history of trauma and no mindfulness training.
Mm.
Do you want to speak to this oval?
Yeah, I'm just seeing that it basically excludes empty and empty. It excludes presence.
Yeah. I wonder actually even if I drew this, because I don't know that it should include emptiness at all. I don't know that I drew this accurately because,
Mm.
well, I would say that there's certainly most adults have experience with a history of the emptiness being violated. And so maybe that is part of it. Yeah, where it's like the emptiness is rarely actually met with emptiness.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on whether you're including a sense of um, like fawning
Mm.
as emptiness,
Hmm. Fawning is emptiness.
right? Uh, like I see a correlation there.
Mm.
Like that state of fawning is like, okay, I just like release my own intention and I just open up to be available to the world.
I would call that receptivity.
Okay.
So this is where maybe okay. So yeah, let's get into this because our
Yeah.
culture places incredibly high value on penetration, especially teaching boys and men that penetrative energy is what's manly and what's powerful. Um, but penetration is only peaceful and productive if it's met with receiving. Every other energy match is violent.
Mm.
So, and I talk about this in terms of cock. So we've got like hard and soft cock for men. And then Viagra tells us that like 4 hours, it means go to the emergency room. Like 4 hours of hard cock is like go to the emergency room. So that's about 15% of the time before we're in emergency, right? But we're telling men that we want that hard cock energy 100% of the time. And then they bring it and we're like, God, not like that.
Right.
Right?
Right. Yeah. As a man, I have recognized, and of course, that penetrative energy is in there. It's in me, right? Um, and once I learned how to cultivate receptivity within me as well, um, the penetrative energy has a place to go inside of myself,
Mm,
right? And that sort of creates this internal creation, internal creative presence that then I get to carry with me.
mm,
Um, since that penetration is resolved in what it's seeking,
mm.
it doesn't get pushed out into everyone else all the time.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah,
Appreciate
yeah.
you. Yeah.
And I think I wanted to speak to that just because yeah, you were saying that like this is what we're taught. We're taught that we bring the penetrative energy for the world to the world.
Yeah.
Um, I just wanted to hold that side by side with this understanding of actually it can be resolved within itself as well.
Mm, mm, yum. Yeah. And this speaks to that fractal aspect, right? So it's like, in order for you to offer open emptiness to the world, you have all this penetration and receptivity that you're containing within yourself and
Mm.
functioning within yourself as that fractal. So it's like all these energies are playing out inside of you. And then the disposition you offer to the world is like a choiceful selection. It's a
Mm.
curation of what's within you.
Mm. Hmm. Mm. Yeah, there's a sense of in the Tao, the circle that holds yin and yang both is called the Wu world.
Mm,
And the Wu world is like the spirit realm, right?
mm,
And the circle itself, the empty circle, is conscious. It is consciousness. So
mm,
there's a sense that when we activate vesselhood, when we activate the consciousness of holding that vessel,
mm.
uh, there's a level of like consciousness that awakens that can sort of like be at choice within all of that. Yeah.
Yum.
Yeah.
Delicious. I love this. I read the Tao. I'm like obsessed with it, but I don't know anything about Taoism or Taoist symbols or
Mm.
anything. So I love that you're bringing that in. So good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So and with this penetrative thing, we're so especially as women, we're met in girlhood with just so much penetration, especially sexual energy penetrating into our fields when we are in the open empty. Like children are open empty. And this is like one of the biggest things I'm finding as I get into the nuance of eros and sexuality and sexual energy. It's like children are open empty. They are open empty, and it's for adults to hold the line.
Mm.
Because open emptiness often seems to be a state of desire, and it might be a state of desire. Like it might even be a state of like supreme readiness, which again is still not actually ready. It's still not, and I think of it like a premature baby. It's like we want to like sure it has lungs at 26 weeks, but like we want it to have like 40-week lungs, we want it to have like, we want it to be like exquisitely developed. And so I think that this is kind of that line where like the puberty line is like there's so much readiness in post-pubescent, immediately like post-pubescent bodies that are like, between like that first day and 5 years from then. There's so much readiness cultivating, and that's a premature fetus. Like that is not a sexually receptive body.
Mm.
And this is why we have laws about being adults, right? Is that like there will be um like erotic energy, there will be sexual desire, there will be all of these things, and like children are meant to develop that within their own bodies. They're not meant to be immediately in exchange, especially with adult bodies.
Yeah, I wonder about that because I think about like play between children as inherently like erotic, right? Like
Yeah.
there is that exchange
Hmm.
of of energy from those centers,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, maybe it's less about readiness and more about like because even readiness implies that there is a specific like thing that there's supposed to be ready for,
Mm.
you know? Um, for me, like a child who is open, that openness of the child, it doesn't know what it's open to.
Yeah.
It's open to the mystery,
Yeah.
right? And so when you have two systems that are open to the mystery relating with each other, then that can be just fine. But when you have one system that's open to the mystery and another system that is holding a specific potential future and then penetrating that open system, that's very different, you know?
100%. Well said. So well said. Yeah. Yeah, and that, I mean, honestly, this is kind of like there's a lot of harm, I think, done in sexual education of children the way that we do it now. um, because of this like threat of the penetrative intent fueled energy that's just latent in the world that like we can expect our child to encounter. We're like,
Mm,
okay, well, you're open to the mystery, but let me bust up some mystery for you. Here's some shit that people are going to want from you. And it's like, oh, what? No. Right. And it's like horrifying to be educated as a child about what's out there.
right.
It's like, it's traumatizing in its own right. And it's
100%.
sexualizing in its own right.
Mhm.
And so it's just such a tricky topic. It's really tricky.
It is in a tricky time to be navigating. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Okay, so because of this high value that we place on penetration, especially women try to like get ourselves to be receptive. And we leave the emptiness and we like either close or we're receptive.
Mm,
Because if penetration is rampant in the world, the only safe state is receptivity.
mm, mm,
Even closeness has a risk, but at least they have to do real violence to me. They have to be the person who will do real violence to me. But like someone who doesn't even want to do violence to me can be violent if their energy is penetrative and mine is
mm,
open
mm,
empty.
mm, mm,
So we have just this one state that can prevent the violation of rampant penetrative energy and its receptivity. And
mm,
this is where I see like a lot of because this is the thing where like we're talking about an erotic continuum, and you're talking about like open empty systems like in some sort of like collaboration or exchange, right? They might be open, empty, receptive, but like what's missing from childhood really is that penetrative energy, that like very idea focused energy. So like they can be, you know, receptive to receptivity, receptive to emptiness, but like not receptive to penetration, right? And so it's like and even just like the penetration of controlling a child, just like that penetration of saying like this is what's right for you. Like the kids get that all the time and it's very confusing to their systems that's trying to learn like what do I believe?
mm.
So, um yeah,
Yeah.
go
The
ahead.
thing that sticks out to me there is like understanding that if I'm bringing penetrative energy to another system, I'm I'm basically forcing that system into a binary response.
Ooh,
Either be receptive
yeah,
and create,
yeah.
right? Or close off and be violated,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Or close in order to protect yourself and avoid
Mm-hmm.
violation,
Yeah.
right? And so it's my responsibility to have a whole range of states that I can move with agility through, so that I'm not forcing, becoming the context that forces other people into a binary option
Mm-hmm.
instead of having at least four, states to
Yeah.
choose from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I mean yeah, it's only a binary because it's like be receptive and be safe or choose something else and be violated, right? Like it's like safety or violation for penetration and it's like safety in receptivity or violation in all these forms. You could be violated empty, you could be violated closed, you could be violated penetrative, like you could have all this violation in any of these dispositions, right?
Right. And then let's talk about the violation that it is for that the common narrative is women want to be receptive. They want to just be in a receptive state, right? Well, no, it's like they want to be in a receptive state because that's the only safe state for them to be in. Number one. Number two, even us just saying that is a penetration upon women.
Mm, mm,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, it's like saying it's like there's some sort of like metaphor here where it's like the trapped person obviously wants this like one amenity of being trapped and it's like well yeah but again like look at the context we're offering this person
Right.
right like
Yeah.
of course they really 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 want junk food but they're in prison and that's the only treat right like there's no other pleasure for this person who's in prison other than junk food like are they really that junk food motivated or is that the one reward
Right.
yeah
Right. Yeah. Creation looks amazing and looks like the best option when there's a poverty of options.
Mm, hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Cool. Cool. Oh, I love that we're talking about this. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we close as this form of protection. So closing helps us when there are threats in the environment. If there are no threats, protection is the threat.
Mm. Read that next line for me.
The next line.
Yeah, that's my
Protection is a
favorite
threat
line.
to creation and intimacy.
That, that. I just think that drives it home. There's nothing wrong with protection, right? There's nothing wrong with closeness. It's a form of protection. Protection is great. But if there are no threats, then protection becomes a threat to creation and intimacy. Gosh, I feel like that just needs to be like repeated on loudspeakers, like everywhere. I love that.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very real. Well, and it's like when someone's armored up, right? Like that will hurt my naked skin. So like if they're in armor, like I at least need clothes on, right? And it's like, and then maybe also I need armor, right? But it's like it's like protection is a state that is rightfully savage, rightfully violent.
Mm,
And yeah, I mean it's like the protection becoming the threat is like what we're talking about when we're talking about a post-traumatic stress response.
mm,
That's where
mm,
protection comes in and becomes the threat because there isn't a threat. And it feels a lot like your penetrative, like that holding of your own penetrative energy with your own receptivity. Like it's like that protection impulse without containment, like can really wreak havoc on a very safe environment.
mm, mm-hmm. Preach it. Got nothing to add to that.
Preaching. Yeah, so the thing about closedness, which is really tricky, and this is we got to go into like the ontology of things, like we're talking about the beingness of things. Like what we get when we close is not necessarily what we're intending to get by closing.
Mm, yeah.
The purpose of the system is to do what the system does. Like whatever system ends up doing, that is its purpose. And we can have
Mm,
an intention that's opposite the purpose,
mhm,
what it actually serves. Um, but the thing about closeness is that if we are orbiting between receptivity and closeness, it only makes sense to have threats around.
mhm,
It does
mm,
not make sense to be in full safety. And also, safety doesn't want us.
mm, mm. Oh, I love the animation of these states as having their own consciousness. Like instead of an image of like one body and these states like moving through the body, there's almost the image of like these states and our bodies like moving through the map, you
Mm,
know, um,
hmm.
like being passed around.
Mm,
Yeah, it's so powerful, so powerful.
yeah.
Yeah, the notion that like safety will, even presence will push you out of itself if you are in a penetrative state.
Mm, hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, or closed, right? Like the closedness, that protective state. Like threats are cool with protection. Like a threat is like makes perfect sense that you're trying to protect and like let me get in and let me see what that protection's like. Let me see if there's any weakness in the armor, right? I would love to have your protection come to the table. Come on in, right? And then safety's like you're kind of acting a little crazy at this picnic. Like you're kind of, why are you wearing full armor? We're just in the park, right? It's like, and I say this too about like tyranny. Tyranny is so durable to rebellion.
Mm,
Tyranny is designed to account for and accommodate rebellion.
mm, mm,
It knows exactly what to do with it. Nature, like a delicate system, is not prepared to navigate rebellion.
Mm,
Like if we go to war with something in the natural environment, as we've seen, species go extinct, right? Like you can very easily upset the natural balance with rebellion. But if there's an artificial balance held in by tyranny,
mm,
it's like rebel away. The more you rebel, the more you understand that your only options are to rebel or obey,
mhm.
right? And that
Yeah,
benefits tyranny.
yeah.
Tyranny doesn't want us being like, oh, I have all these options. I could obey, I could go somewhere else, I could blah. Like tyranny is like, no, 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 your only options are to obey or rebel, and we can
Yeah.
handle your rebellion.
Love this. I hear bio como latte so clearly as you're speaking about this,
I
which
can,
is a compliment to you.
you're gonna make me cry. I love his work. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Just some
Yeah, yeah, this
wild.
this sense of like the forget I heard him say it once like if you try to crawl out of the hole, you just widen the hole.
Epic.
Yeah.
Oh, epic. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. So if I have protection practices, safety won't keep me around.
Mm,
And yeah, so if only threat then makes itself available to me, protection makes really good sense. So this is why boundaries are at the same time what I show up for and how I show up. Both practices at the same time, and they're refining each other. I show up trusting because that's what it means to honor a culture of safety. And I don't show up where I can't show up trusting.
mm, mm. I love that. This takes boundary out of the limitation to closedness. Normally, we think of a boundary as being a closed state, but
Yeah.
you're
No.
actually,
Yeah.
yeah, right, right. And you're actually speaking about using other states and commitments to other states as a strategic move that achieves the same results as a boundary would, right? But without limiting yourself to closeness.
Yeah.
Yeah, so powerful.
And it's the membrane, right? It's like you're saying, like the membrane is the boundary. Actually, and the boundary is what gives us connection. Like two things connect, right? And it's like where they connect is at the boundary, right? A land boundary is the border, right? It's like where the land connects.
Mm,
Like one land turns into another. I had to create that distinction to say that this thing is connected to the other thing.
right.
Otherwise, I'd just be in the country.
Right.
Cool. All right. Yeah. So modern romance is usually in this penetrative, closed, receptive state.
Mm,
Um, and so we're shooting for this like green creational uh gold place. But it's a narrow target, and then we're experiencing so much scarcity.
mm,
I just saw somebody post like yesterday about, oh, he creates safety for her so she can relax. And I'm like, okay, well, if I can't create it without him, then he can't create it for me.
mm, mm,
Like that's just not a thing. That's just not a thing. So, yeah, so this is pretty much missing the empty state.
mhm,
And I like this disconnection part because a lot of times, like people, uh, that is the only refuge of the open empty state is when someone else is closed. Like I can be open empty if someone else is for sure closed, then it's safe for me. Um,
mm,
but if there's anything other than closeness in the environment, it might not be safe for me to stay open empty.
mm,
Okay. Yeah,
mm,
so a receptive state is the only one in which violation is impossible. So we as especially as women crave to be receptive and then we close when it isn't safe for receptivity. And then the experience of our safety seems to be in the hands of the world. So going from receptive to closed, to me, my best analogy of it is if you could never see or smell a liquid, you could only know what it was if you drank it.
You could never see or smell it. You could only know it by drinking it.
Because open emptiness is that like curious and evaluative state. We're like, huh, what's going on over there? And receptivity is like, I have to take it in.
Mm,
We take it in.
mm,
And this is like definitely where a lot of modern romance is getting stuck because women are like, well, do I close off to him completely or do I have sex with him? It's like,
right.
whoa,
Right. Yeah.
whoa. Like,
Oh.
do you know there's a lot of territory available that you're skipping here? Like,
uh, yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. What a poor strategy to aim for receptivity as the baseline,
yeah.
and then to only find out that you actually didn't want to receive it after it's inside of you.
Oh,
Like your ancestors didn't do that. If they did, you wouldn't be here right now. You know?
for sure, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the ancestors who used that strategy were the ones who ate the wrong berries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and just the way that you said that, it's like I don't know if you like can't know how hard that hits for women, but like to only know if you want it while once it's inside you is like such a real dating and like that is a reality for women. That is a
Mm-hmm.
reality and it's a tragic one for sure.
Mm-hmm.
This is the field of like self-violation all the time. But it's like, yeah, I can only know it by drinking it. I have lost the skill of this open, empty evaluation. And I
Mm-hmm.
notice this too when I just write about my platonic friendships. Like I live mostly in this empty, empty receptive. Like I'm relating to my friends in this empty receptive place, and they're in the empty receptive place. And it's like, I talk about my friend tucking me into bed, and I've like made a post about this, and so many people like make it about him wanting to have sex with me and make it about like all these other things. And I'm just like, oh, you like really don't even know. Like you literally don't know about this empty receptive, empty, empty, or empty receptive. And like what's crazy
Right.
to me is they're sexualizing something that has probably never in their lives been a sexual event, actually. Like
Right.
getting tucked into bed is such a childhood thing. It's really not something we often do for romantic partners, right? It's not, and so it's like it's so immensely a platonic event that to be sexualized when I talk about it is just like it can only be that you don't have this concept that two adults could relate in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. And how that is deepened and reinforced by the polarity notion of, masculine, feminine, penetrative, receptive. This is the only way
Yeah.
for people to relate.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, now men and women can have friendships. What even is a friendship?
Oh my
The
God.
only purpose of human relating now is to create a baby. That's the only.
Yeah. Yeah.
Opt me out of that mythology, please.
Yeah, it's just really something else, but it's just crazy because it's like people can see platonic connection and know it's platonic. But it's something about me writing about it, they just can't imagine it. Just can't imagine it being platonic, right? But like you can tell the difference when like a brother and sister hug versus a romantic partner hug.
Mm,
And so there is this like felt sense of the difference and people can feel it, but then it's almost like they lose the thread and can't believe in it when they're just hearing about it, you know?
right. And I imagine that that's largely a consequence of the way that these things are spoken about.
Mm, hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that question, what even is friendship? I think that that's a huge deal right now. That's
Hmm.
such a huge deal right now. What even is friendship?
Yeah. I have, I imagine something similar to what you have, which I'm really grateful for, which is a beautiful ecology of relationships that are so nuanced and complex. And I was just talking to a friend about this the other night, like, yo, we did it. Like, we created relationships that we never even saw examples of. Like, we couldn't even dream of these relationships. Like, we just had to like wade through, like, nope, not that, not that, not that, not that. And it's like, this, and now we get to be that example. Um, yeah, so I'm really grateful for anything. I mean, it's amazing. Like you said, this striking this harmony in relationships, where it's exactly what it needs to be and nothing it doesn't need to be, is
Mm,
so beautiful. And yeah, anything we can do to make that more available,
mm,
uh, yeah, let's
mm.
boost those signals.
Um, Well, and it just strikes me that's exactly what you're doing with clients too, is like you're taking them from this like technical to um like innovative, and then the mastery is that unimaginable like the field that one cannot imagine, right?
Oh, yeah,
And that's where you're taking your clients as a coach, is
yes.
like to that unimaginable place.
Yes, yes. I love that you said that. It's something that I actually have been like meaning to put in my messaging more, but I haven't been clear if it would like even speak to anyone. But it's exactly how I've thought about it myself, is like, where am I going to take you to the place you can't even dream of yet? Like that's, and in order to get there, we need this empty openness,
Mm,
which allows for a courtship and a relationship with the mystery,
mm, mm.
you know?
A courtship and a relationship with the mystery. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So you and I, when I sent you this, you were like, this is the slide that resonates the most.
yeah.
You and I both steward our energetic orbits so that we're here. And so there's like my stewardship of like how I'm going to show up, and then also my stewardship of what I'm going to show up for. And like you said, like, how do we relate with closeness? Like you'll see, closeness just kind of isn't in my circle. I mean, I'm just all set. Like, you know what? Like you disconnect, great. Of people to connect with, you know? And so I think like a lot of like my interactions with closeness are early on low stakes interactions. And it's really just to identify that closeness is there. And when I identify that closeness is there, that's just not something that I can show up for and have a good time.
Mm. Yeah, preach it.
Yeah. Um,
And it's exactly this. And there's something, I forget what the name of it was, that one of the writings you sent me, the low, the
mm,
lowest point in the valley, the river. Um, and you said something about the man who is not going to waste time when there is alchemy to be had, when there's alchemy to be done, right? And that's really how I think of my boundaries too. It's like, I'm here to serve this circle.
mm,
I'm here to be of service to amplifying the presence of that in the world,
mm,
alchemizing that in the world. And so any relational encounter that does not allow for me to do that,
mm,
because it's not in a state that makes that possible,
mm.
um, there's a skillfulness at saying, like, bless you. And like, I'm going in this direction,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, and that is, again, I say this about boundaries all the time. Boundaries are what I am available for. They are what
Mm-hmm.
I am interfacing with. And so when we have that positive understanding of exactly what my energy is for, then it's really not about being like, oh, it's not for that. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. It like stops this whole like rebellious energy. And it's like, I tell people, say no with your body by not being there.
Yes.
Like, I don't say no with my words. I say yes with my words. And if I'm
Mm.
somewhere where I want to say no with my words, then I should say no with my body and not be there.
Mm. Hmm. That is so radical. I love it. I love it. Yeah. And yeah, my heart goes out to people who really believe that they can never do that, can never be in that place, or because of certain commitments that they've already made and that they feel beholden to,
Mm,
to uh, marry themselves to others who are in these states, or even like, gosh, like you're caring for a sick parent who is not capable of being in anything but a closed or penetrative state. You
mm,
know, there are times where, um, where those boundaries become a little harder to uphold, and where we do have to then have these skills to interact with those states. My heart goes out to those places also.
Well, and I've found personally for myself that like the um the gateway to never interacting with these states is to know how to. Like if I don't know how to, then I'm just avoiding it. If I know how to, then I'm choosing what I do
Mm,
want to interact with.
mm,
And so yes, so important to be able to like steward ourselves. This feels like the permaculture type thing. So it's like that's why I am completely unavailable to choose in to closeness anywhere I have a choice.
mm,
Because life is inevitably going to offer me some dose of closeness, right?
mhm,
Inevitably, I'm going to encounter this in the world. Or I'm going to have a few years where I'm taking care of an aging relative and I don't, like I have control and choice, but like do I, like I
right.
couldn't be who I want to be and reject this person or reject my care for this person. So it's like if I have this big commitment and in almost all of my life, it's all this open emptiness, receptivity, blah, blah, blah. I have plenty of tolerance for the closeness and the penetration.
Mm,
Like I am nourished over here so that I can give. And this is part of the village principles teaching that I gave on the 12-week teaching was like, literally, what does it look like to steward mutual empowerment with someone who you care for, right? This isn't a power dynamic anymore, like me to my client, me to my aging relative. That's not actually, when we were in the village principles, that's not a power dynamic. That's a mutual empowerment situation that we're navigating.
mm, mm,
And what I want to do instead of having power over them is I double my standards. So I'm holding their highest standard and my highest standard at the same time.
mm, mm,
And I acknowledge that a relationship where traditionally we would say there's a power dynamic, what we're actually encountering is a relationship which is for the benefit of the other person and not for my benefit. Like I might benefit from it, but it is not for my benefit. It is for their benefit. So there's this kind of like who's centered actually
mm.
in the relationship is more important than like who has power over who, right?
Yes. Yeah, and I love that you brought that in. It's like, can I even center anyone other than myself?
Mm,
If I cannot move with agility through these states within myself, if I don't have the capacity to move from closedness to emptiness,
mm,
right? If I don't have the capacity to move from emptiness to receptivity strategically
yeah,
in order to be of service, right?
yeah.
Then uh, the dynamics that are tugging on my internal world are going to be so loud
Mm,
that it will actually be impossible for me to center anyone else.
mm. Beautiful, beautiful. Chef's kiss, yeah. I give it the metaphor of partner dance a lot, like when I'm talking about like, and so if I can't be on beat and keep my balance, then how am I going to dance with someone else,
Mm,
right? Especially lead
mm,
them. But like
mhm,
if I can't keep my balance, then I'm also not capable of counterbalancing, right? And I'm
mm,
not capable um of like balancing myself and letting the other person balance themselves because I might be asking my leader to balance me.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I actually like I decided when I got into somatics to go straight to mastery rather than healing.
Mm,
Because for me, mastery is actually the beginning. Like once you have the skills and the mastery at moving through somatic states,
mm.
then you can begin to go out and do the work in the world.
Ooh,
Then you can really do anything, right? But if we're just aiming at healing, it's like, okay, great, you heal, whatever that means to whoever's using it, right? And then you still don't actually have the skillfulness to navigate anything,
yeah.
you know?
Mm, beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. I mean, yeah, it's like it's as if I would come to you and be like, the purpose of this bucket is for it to not leak, right? And you're like, why is it important that the bucket not leak? Like, aren't you
Right,
like, why does it need to be full of water? Are you gonna pour it somewhere? Are you gonna like,
right,
like, what are we doing with this water in here? Why does this bucket need to hold water? Like, that's a much more grounding question, right?
right.
Like,
Yeah,
sure, the purpose of the bucket is to not leak, but like, that's not actually its purpose. That's like what it needs in order to fulfill its purpose.
right,
And so,
right.
and I've been saying this for a long time, which is like, we can't solve problems with problem solving consciousness, but problems can't persist if we focus on a larger prosperity.
Mm, mm. Yes, 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 yes. Exactly that. Exactly that. Yeah, there's an inherent problem focus that comes with healing,
Yeah, big time. Well, I mean, healing starts with the premise, I am not whole,
right?
right? Which is something I would only say about myself, by the way. Like, I'm not going to look at a person who's missing an arm and be like, you're not a whole person. Like, horrifying, actually. Like, when we think about it that way, it's just like, what?
Right.
What?
Mhm.
Like, I'm a
Yeah.
person who has one arm. That's a whole person. I'm a whole person with one arm. Like,
Right.
that's a whole person, right? And so it's like, I wouldn't go and say that about someone else and say, like, you're not whole because of this thing. But I would say that. I would go in and say that about myself. Oh my God, I'm not whole because of this thing. Like, I got to heal this thing. Whereas
Right.
someone else, it's so easy to see that they're still a whole person. And this happens to be the configuration. It might not be ideal, but like, it's whole.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's perfectly designed
Mm.
to do the thing that only it can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could keep talking about this for hours. Okay. So we've got openness. I think we're already over our half-hour target, but
Yeah, we definitely
so openness is a polarity of emptiness and receiving. So open emptiness is a state that's so easy to violate. So we learn in childhood to close this vulnerability because we don't control our environment. So then as adults, we may need to reclaim the state of emptiness. And I say that the best tool for this is a pristine container. So back to the healing idea, like so many people are like healing and trying to push their edges at the same time.
Mm,
I'm like, you have a cast on your leg. Please stop trying to hike a mountain, right? Like, so for
mm.
me, the pristine container is what sets up those conditions for wholeness and healing to become obvious.
Ooh. Yeah.
The pristine container is a state where I am not in the least bit challenged by anything I encounter.
Mm.
It's very peaceful because it's very easy to just take a few weeks off. I mean, it's not going to ripple through any of your relationships to like take 2 weeks off. And if it does, good riddance, right? But like it can be as simple as just a couple weeks or a couple months where we're like, I'm not going to be challenged relationally. I'm just going to give myself a pristine container where everything inside of it is easy.
Mm.
Everything inside of it is easy.
Mm.
Everything inside of it is safe. And so it's like, because we are open empty as children, and then our parents are like, you're going to go here, you're going to go there. This is the living environment you're going to have. And we have no control over that. Then we're like, okay, well, in order to survive what you're serving me, I better close up. Right.
Mm.
And then we forget in adulthood that we can control every single aspect of our lives. Like we actually have the ability to move our own body anywhere, and we don't need any permission, right? And so
Mm.
it's like there's this learned helplessness where we can forget that we have the agility to move to somewhere safe, and we stay sold on this lie that I have to contend with whatever is in the world.
Mhm. Mm. And there's this, it's compounded by the fact that the empty state is the one from which we see most clearly
Mm,
all of our options,
mm,
right? So the fact that we lose access to the empty state, then we even more just cycles. We believe that there is no choice, there is no choice, there is no choice, there is no choice, or there's only one choice, there's only two choices,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I love this. And that's exactly it. It's like reclaiming that emptiness. Um, that is it's like reclaiming the zero. That then gives rise to the one, the two, the three, the 7.697, however nuanced you want to get at that point. But this aspect of differentiating, delineating, dividing first, and then getting back into the addition, the multiplication, and the exponents, the exponents. Yeah.
Mm. Oh, I love it. Yes, it is the zero, and it is that place where we can see all the options. And that the way that you just said it that way is just like so good because
Mm,
it's the field of my positive agency. And this is why I said like adults with mindfulness training reclaim this zero, right? And it's certainly possible to give children enough mindfulness training so that, or like validate their mindfulness. Children are so mindful already. We don't really need to teach them mindfulness. We simply need to
agreed.
validate it and not steal it from them, but we do
Right. And the
invalidate it and
best way
steal it
for
from
us to
them.
do that is to uphold it ourselves,
Yeah.
right? We create the context
Hmm.
that validates mindfulness.
Yeah, 100%. And there's just so much that like our society runs on abstractions, right? Like money is an abstraction. A relationship is an abstraction, like
Mm,
so much of what we're taught to invest in is pure abstraction, actually, to the point where, I use the word delusion very casually, right? Like right now, I have a delusion that it's 11:33 a.m. Like you have a different delusion of what time it is.
right.
Because you're in a different place,
Yeah,
right?
actually, no, my delusion says it's 2:33.
Yeah, right. So, like, here we are in the now moment with a disagreeing delusion of what time it is.
Right? And isn't that like how like a great example of a simple way in which we can hold, like we all already hold collaboration. It's like I'm not gonna penetrate someone because they live in a different time zone because I can't stand the possibility of someone's understanding and delusion of time not being the same as mine.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, I wanted to have this conversation in the morning, but it's your afternoon, so guess we can't do
Yeah.
that. Yeah, fascinating. Oh, wow. Well, I'm so glad we had this conversation. Thank you so much for talking this through with me. And yeah, you have so much brilliant insight on all of this that I'm just honored.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Seriously. Yeah. Um, there's like few experiences I treasure more than speaking with a mind who brings forth my best ideas and then challenges them and helps them grow.
Oh,
Yeah. Thank you so much.
thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you. And I hope that this is valuable to whoever comes upon it and watches it. Houston is a coach, mastery coaching is his niche. He wants to work with more and more pro athletes to bring this mastery. And I am teaching the village technology, the timeless technology of right relationship. What does it look like to be in a healthy, thriving network where we steward abundance to bring ourselves together to foster closeness? So, if you're interested in either one of those paths, you can hire Houston, you can hire me. There's going to be links in the description here to show you how to do that. Thank you so much.